Hey guys, welcome back to All Houseplants. My name is Stephanie. Today's video is called Indoor Gardening 101, Watering. Watering is perhaps one of the most difficult things about owning houseplants, yet it's one of the most important things that you as a plant owner are going to do. So we kind of have a lot to cover today. So first things first, we'll talk about how often should you water. And there's a lot of debate on the internet in regards to this. Old school people say once a week, more than that, less than that, depending on the type of plant. New school thought is listen to what the plant is telling you. Is it asking for more water or less water? Is the soil wet or dry? My answer would be that it's somewhere in the middle. So I do keep a schedule with my plants. I have about 80 of them. If I didn't have somewhat of a schedule, I would forget. And if I didn't make time for watering, it wouldn't happen. Watering 80 plants takes me about an hour once a week. But that being said, I don't water every plant regardless of its condition. I do look at every plant and decide how much or how little water it needs on watering day. And in the meantime, if I notice it needs water when it's not watering day, I will give it a little something extra to get it through to watering day. So I would recommend to keep some sort of a schedule that's good for you. I would recommend try once a week. My watering day is normally Saturday. That way I know, okay, today I have to go around and check all the plants. It's good for the plants because most houseplants are tropical, and tropical plants do get regular rain in the rainy seasons. And it's good for you because it helps you remember. That way you're not forgetting about your plants or doting on them too much. You have your schedule and you stick to it. You may also be wondering what type of water to use. I personally use tap water or sink water. My water is very hard, so I do keep that in mind, but the plants seem to do well with it. You can also use rainwater as long as it's collected cleanly and not someplace that has runoff or contaminants. And you can also use distilled water or spring water. And every now and again, I also do use fish tank water because I do have 2 large 6-foot-long fish tanks in my living room. And so I do borrow water from them once in a while because the fish water has nitrates in it as a product of fish waste, and the plants love that. But for most plants, tap water or sink water is perfectly fine. Next, we'll talk about when to water. So you'll want to water your plant when the soil is starting to look dry. And here I have a plant that is dry. And you can see that the soil is a lighter color. It makes this kind of crunchy noise when you touch it. And when you stick your finger down 1 to 2 inches, oh, it's probably at least 2 inches now. I just feel the very tip has a little bit of moisture on it. You can see that dry soil, this is better, does not stick to your finger. Additionally, dry soil feels room temperature. Moist soil feels cool. And when you stick your finger into a moist pot, like this one right here, you'll feel coolness. Notice there's no scratching. And when I stick my finger into it, it has a lot of You can actually see the moisture sheen on my finger, and you can see all the dirt that sticks to it. That is wet soil versus, again, dry soil. Additionally, pots that are watered or have a higher moisture content in them, pots with moist soil, weigh more than pots that are dry or needing to be watered. So one of the important things that you should learn with each of your plants is the watered weight versus the dry weight. So how much does the plant weigh after you've watered it versus what does it feel like if you haven't watered it for 2 weeks or more? This way, you can tell if your plant needs water simply by touching the pot and picking it up. If you are struggling, you can buy a moisture meter from online or a local garden center to help. Stick the hydrometer into the soil, and it will tell you the moisture of the soil. So, signs of underwatering. I will come over here to the Cebu Blue Pothos. One sign of underwatering is yellowing leaves that turn brown. You can see this bottom leaf here is starting to turn yellow. And, well, I plucked them off. But if you have lower leaves starting to turn yellow, that can be a sign of underwatering. Over here, it might look like this a little bit. Though this plant is now well watered, sometimes it does get a little thirsty. So sometimes the leaves will yellow like that. Another sign of underwatering is drooping or wilting leaves and stems. The plant most notable for that behavior are peace lilies, and I'll insert a picture of a drooping peace lily because I don't have one on hand. Another way to tell if plants need water is by checking the leaves for rigidity. So you might do this with a plant like a cactus, a succulent, a sansevieria, a peperomia, a Hoya, anything that have rigid leaves or leaves that tend to hold a little bit of water, even a ZZ plant. You might also notice little wrinkles in the plant or the leaves that will key into you that the size of the plant is shrinking because it doesn't have enough water. So if you notice those signs, do water that plant. Now you may find yourself asking, how much water do I water? So that is different based on the size of the plant, the size of the pot, and the size of the root ball. But for beginners, you want to water the plant thoroughly so that water is pouring out of the drainage hole. And make sure that the pot is really saturated, that water is pouring out and the pot feels heavy. This is a fully watered plant. You want to try and memorize this weight so that you know what a watered plant feels like versus when it starts to lose water and starts to dry up. You'll notice the pot weighs less. Additionally, the seasons affect how much water you need to use. So spring and summer, or the growing season, where there's more light and warmer temperatures, plants are going to use more water because warm temperatures speed up their metabolism. They're going to require more water to keep their life functions going. Same thing with light. If plants are receiving a lot of light, the cells are being activated to create food, and the plants need water to create food. So if they're receiving a lot of light, they need more water. In fall and winter, there's less light and less warmth, and so the functions of the plant are going to be slowed down. Cooler temperatures in the house and outside slow down metabolism, as does lower light. So if there's less ambient light around the plant, the cells are going to be less stimulated to make food or photosynthesize, and so the plant is not going to be using water as quickly as it does in the spring or summer. So do take into account the seasons. I actually messed that up coming into fall. It's been a very warm fall here, and I did overwater a bunch of my plants because we went from 90-degree days in the beginning of September. Now we're down to 50-degree days, so summer turned into fall overnight. And sometimes that does happen. So you just have to be careful as the seasons change, that you're paying attention to what's really going on, especially with light levels. Another thing that affects how much plants need to be watered is the type of container they're in. So if a plant has a drainage hole, that does allow excess water to escape. If a pot does not have a drainage hole, it does not allow water to escape. If you do choose to practice closed container plant ownership, I do just caution you about overwatering. A lot of my pots, especially the large floor pots, do not have drainage holes, and so I have to keep this in mind. And it can be done, but you just have to be mindful how much you're watering. Additionally, terracotta pots breathe. The clay has pores, it's a porous material. So terracotta pots allow water evaporation. Plastic pots do not. So if you're like me, most of my pots are plastic. The pots that are not plastic are double-sided glazed. Glazed pots, inside and outside, are a lot like plastic pots in that they don't allow the movement of water through the container, like through the walls of the container like terracotta does. So terracotta pots, plants in terracotta pots, you'll have to water more often. Plants in plastic containers or double glazed containers, you'll have to water less often. And again, I can't stress the importance of getting to know the weight of your watered plant versus the weight of your dry plant. If you don't use a hydrometer, and I don't, it really does help to determine how moist a root ball is, because you can't stick your finger all the way to the bottom of the pot. Especially if your plant is in a large pot. Like my large pots are 17 inches tall, so I'm not sticking my hand all the way to the bottom of the pot. Okay guys, so signs of overwatering. The number one sign of overwatering, brown leaf tips. And I'll show you this platinum mist peace lily because I've struggled with this plant a bit. So at the bottom you can see we really had a lot of overwatering here. And we've had some overwatering throughout. And that was because initially this plant was potted in too large of a pot. But we'll take a peek inside now. And now the soil is just a bit moist. You can see my fingers got just a little bit of powdery dirt on it. I can tell by touching the dirt that it's not cold, but it's cool-ish. So this soil is reasonably moist. I would say evenly moist. And the newer leaves do not have brown tips on them. because, oh, okay, a teeny tiny bit, because I have started to get the hang of exactly how much water this plant needs. And you can do that as well. So, other than the brown tips, other signs of overwatering are a heavy pot, like we talked about, moist soil, which again is cool to the touch and sticks to your fingers, and you may even have a sheen of wetness on your finger after you take it out of the dirt. A drooping plant, if it's been overwatered for quite some time, because what's happening now is that the plant is succumbing to root rot. Root rot is when the roots have been drowned, essentially, where there's so much water in the soil that air and other nutrients aren't able to get in, and the plant is unable to absorb oxygen. So the roots will turn brown, orange, yellow, basically any other color than white. On most plants, you want nice white roots, and they should be firm in texture, not mushy or friable. The exception is orchids. Orchid roots should be green. If orchid roots start to turn white, yellow, brown, or any other color other than green, the plant is overwatered. And you can look at that by lifting the orchid out of the pot, or by lifting your plant out of its pot and taking a look at the root ball. There is another exception to the white roots rule. Snake plants normally have orange roots. This is an example of a healthy snake plant. This is an example of a healthy root ball with white, firm roots. This is what root rot looks like. The roots are brown, mushy, and rotting away from the plant. A tricky one is that a sign of overwatering is yellowing of the lower leaves. So I know that I said that yellow leaves is a sign of underwatering, and that's true. The problem is that yellowing leaves are also a sign of overwatering. And so that's why it's important to know the content of the soil. Is it wet? Is it dry? Is the pot heavy or light? And it's important to look at other components other than just what the leaves are doing. Also, on a plant that's overwatered, if it has brown tips and yellow leaves, there's a chance that the leaf tips turned brown first, and now the lower leaves are succumbing to root rot and overwatering. So look at the plant as a whole, and the pot, and the soil, and the root ball, not just at the leaves by themselves. So what factors affect watering? A few of them we've talked about already, namely the seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. So like I said before, the more light there is, and as light increases through spring and summer, the more water a plant will need. And as light decreases in fall and winter, the less light a plant will need. Additionally, the temperature in your house matters. In the warmer months, and you may have the windows open, the plant will use more water because it's warm out. Or if you put your house plants outside, they're experiencing spring and summer temperatures, and the higher metabolism rate that is encouraged by the warmer temperature will cause the plant to use more water. In fall and winter, as temperatures decrease, plants will use less water, and as light decreases and there's less light throughout the day, they will also use less water because they're not being called upon to use water by their need to produce food. The pot also affects watering. Like I said earlier, terracotta pots have a breathable surface, So water is actually able to evaporate from the soil out of the pot, which if you're a chronic overwaterer, terracotta may be good for you. If you do use terracotta pots, just remember to use a plastic tray under the terracotta tray, or the terracotta pot may leave a water ring on your wood table or wooden shelves, because the tray will breathe as well, not just the pot. So if you do use terracotta, keep that in mind. Double-sided or inner and outer glazed ceramic and plastic pots retain the most water because they are impenetrable to water evaporation. Plants with drainage holes also allow more water to escape because they allow the plant to drain completely, whereas pots with no drainage hole do not allow excess water to drain. So keep in mind that if you are watering a plant with no drainage, that water will collect at the bottom of the pot. And so just make sure to water lightly and go easy at first. You can always add water later, but if you've overwatered a plant with no drainage hole, it's going to be difficult and time-consuming to correct. Lastly, the size of the plant's root ball and the size of the pot affect watering. If you have a huge plant in a tiny pot with a gigantic root ball that takes up most of the pot, that plant is going to need to be watered constantly because the plant is using up all the water that soil can hold very quickly. If you have a tiny plant with a small root ball potted in a pot that's too large, that's going to use quite a bit less water because the root ball is so small and because so much more water is in that pot, so your chances of overwatering are better. That's why they say to only pot your plant up 1 or 2 inches in diameter at a time, to avoid putting a plant with too small of a root ball in a pot that's too large. Lastly, how to fix overwatering, because that is the most likely thing that all of us are going to do is overwater. Underwatering is an easy fix. Give the plant some water. Water it. That's easy. Overwatering is less easy. So the first thing you can do when you've overwatered a plant, you've dumped a ton of water in it and you say, uh-oh, too much water. The first thing you can do is you can repot the plant. So if it'll come out of the pot easy, if you can take it out without damaging it, you can repot the plant in drier soil. If you don't want to do that because you don't want to damage the root ball, or if you've overwatered something like Hoya that have a very sensitive root ball to begin with, another thing you can do is wick up some of that water with paper towel. Paper towels are very absorbent and they wick really easily. Another thing you can do if you've overwatered your plant is to think back to what I said about environmental conditions and water use. So if you've poured too much water on your plant, how do you get it to use the water? You can put it in a sunnier spot for a couple of weeks, but be careful not to burn it. If you're moving it from low light to a direct south window, you're gonna burn the plant. Put it in maybe an east or west window if you're moving it from a low light situation, but put it somewhere where it's getting more light, and increasing that plant's light will increase its use of the water and thus help the plant correct the overwatering by itself. Another thing you can do is increase the ambient temperature. Put the plant somewhere warm, somewhere where there's more warmth to encourage that plant's metabolism to speed up and to use that excess water. Lastly, and this is a trick that I sometimes do on occasions where I overwater my plants, turn on a fan. And the reason why you do this is because plants have stomata. They're tiny openings in the tops and bottoms of the leaves, and stomata allow the plants to breathe. They allow the plant to get rid of oxygen, which is a byproduct of their photosynthesis, and they allow the plants to breathe in carbon dioxide. So plants have these tiny little noses and mouths all over the tops and bottoms of their leaves. When you turn on a fan, you are blowing air past these little openings. The openings also release water, moisture. So by turning on a fan, you're essentially blowing the moisture out of the plant. All the little stomatas will open, air will brush by, and as it does, the plant will give off that excess moisture that it's soaking up through the roots and will release it into the air. And so turning on a fan, coupled with increasing the temperature and light, is how I personally deal with overwatering. I don't like to tear the plant out of the pot. I don't like to damage the root ball. I will use the paper towel method if I've dumped a lot of water in there. But if I know I've overwatered a plant, I will put it in a sunnier location. I will turn up the temperature if I can, and I will leave a ceiling fan running for days if I have to, depending on how big the plant is, on how big the room is, whatever. But these are all ways that have worked for me to fix overwatering. And then, of course, obviously, learn from your mistake. So if you've watered it too much last time, go for less next time. It's so much easier to underwater a plant because it's an easier fix than it is to overwater a plant and then have to try and undo all that watering. So good luck, you guys. Leave any comments below. Ask any questions that you might have. I think I've covered just about everything I can think of in regards to watering. And we will touch on some of these subjects later in different videos, like when we cover types of soil, when we cover types of pots. We will touch back on how it relates to watering. But the most important thing to remember is that all these things are related. Light, watering, type of soil, type of pot, type of plant. So my hope is that you're learning something from the videos, taking what you're learning and then using it to problem solve with your plant, your pots, your environment, your living space, etc. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative and that it answered some of your questions. Leave any questions down below in the comments. Give a like if you did. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. And thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.